This movie I have a real soft spot for this film, Nightcrawler 2014. A real soft spot for it because I saw it at one of those like terrible like $2 movie theaters, like where the film like gets distributed there like the day before it releases on Blu-ray or something. And I remember getting good old like whiskey drunk with a pretty lady, with a pretty gal, and we went and saw Nightcrawler on my birthday in 2015, February 2015, and I had no idea what this movie was about. I wasn't even a big Jake Gyllenhaal fan like at all. It was just the $2 movie theater has a huge selection of like two movies to choose from, but we picked Nightcrawler, and I was pretty astonished by it. I really liked the theater experience, and I've always wanted to cover it on my channel, especially with you, David. I always wanted to cover it on this channel, because I think that there's a lot of good in it that speaks directly to the decade it was made, to its era, to the 2010s. We've had a lot of like really really smoldering, really like crushing critiques of capitalism in the 2010s that I've been fascinated by that motif. I think that the best films of the 2010s, outside of The Invitation, 2015, Karan Kusama made that. That's my favorite film of the 2010s. But I think that films like The Social Network, where really everything Sorkin worked on, Social Network, Molly's Game, Steve Jobs, films like Nightcrawler, these really artful critiques of capitalism, and Nightcrawler seems to be the most overt in it, and also the most ruthless.
Nightcrawler is a debut film for Dan Gilroy, who not only wrote this, but also directed it. Mm-hmm. And it was very good, and I just, not saying very good, it was actually just very sublime in certain respects.
Oh, yeah.
Because I definitely got a Jake Gyllenhaal October Sky-esque feel to the inspirational theme going on throughout this particular film, but it's also neo-noir. So at the same time, it's different in that the context and the environment of what's being shot at is much more removed.
Yeah, it's neo-noir, sure.
Yeah.
That argument by definition works. Yeah, he's a crime reporter working at night in LA. But
sorry, neo-noir.
No, it's totally fine. I didn't mean to, snidely correct you. Leave that for the commenters. But, Jake Gyllenhaal, when you were bringing up, the inspirational October Sky qualities, I think that Dan Gilroy was definitely aping those, or, inverting them, right?
Exactly,
because it's, ironic, it's duplicitous, because at the heart of it, I think it's symbolic of an entrepreneur or a small business really becoming something successful, getting that slice of the American pie, and all of the metaphorical or even hyper-literal people that he has to trample over, he has to abuse and discard and really just violate.
Yeah, and we have to, before I get ahead on all of those themes being discussed, because it's definitely there, I wanted to start and take a moment just to appreciate the composition.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the composition really quick first too, because my neo-noir statement wasn't just that it was. I wouldn't call it neo-noir personally. I'm just saying by definition, by tropes, and by atmosphere. I mean, sure, probably, but this film has Michael Mann written all over it, and Michael Mann has never made a noir film, in my opinion. He makes these LA cityscapes, crime sagas, and Dan Gilroy's composition is certainly in debt to everything that Michael Mann built with films like Heat and Collateral and Manhunter, incredibly in debt to that really interesting style of filming cityscapes at different camera speeds and settings that you think might create a sort of staccato editing process as well. This is a film that really, LA is a character in it, and that's true of every Michael Mann film, but specifically the way that these two directors film cities. But I definitely credit Michael Mann for having the greatest compositional influence over this film. This film is very, very, very Michael Mann. And the neo-noir elements are there, but I think that Michael Mann kind of modern crime saga feel is a lot more evident, a lot more palpable. Compositionally, it is wonderful, though. It is wonderful, but I'm just thinking that it's almost too similar to like Miami Vice or something that I associate with Michael Mann. It's almost too similar, so I can't exactly give Gilroy too much credit.
Yeah.
With that, like as some sort of like brilliant genius. What I will say that is genius is that we've had a lot of great men, a lot of great women ape the same styles that I'm talking about and not have the same sort of effect, like people like Christopher Nolan, like people like even Kusama has tried to borrow or lift Michael Mann's compositional methods, and while they don't fail, they don't transcend like Gilroy does every once in a while in this film. Every once in a while, it is so meditative that it's serene, but it's that meditative Michael Mann thing where like it's guided in a way. Like it's impossible not to feel something when you're looking at like this like post-capitalist dreamscape, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's impossible not to feel something, but it's like more so intuitive rather than increasingly deliberate when we get those cityscapes. But then when we are in like scenes of action, I think the film is wonderfully edited. And didn't he edit this too? Why don't you talk while I figure that out?
Yeah, so take a moment to also point out Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as Lou Bloom.
Yeah.
Because Lou Bloom also elevated and transcended much of the direction.
Oh, yes, he did. And just a quick note on the editor, it's actually Dan Gilroy's brother who edited it. Okay. So that's where my confusion was. So either way, glad it's a family affair. Yeah, let's talk about the performance. That's really what this film is known for, if anything. I wish it was known more for its like hypercritical view of capitalism. But Jake Gyllenhaal, oh my God. Yeah, a wonderful performance.
Yeah, I don't want to go into anything psychological evaluation or anything, but, I can at the very least say that he had a psychopathic tendency to him.
Well, if we were to go into any sort of, like,
Lou Bloom
behavioral analysis, I don't think it's right to view Lou Bloom as an actual individual, as a human, like, character.
Exactly.
I think it's symbolic of what I was saying, of, like, a certain cog within capitalism that start to move with the machine rather than against it and like really increase itself. Like,
yeah, and I agree with that. And I think the reason why I'm even saying any of that at all in the first place is because it's very helpful to have the discussion paralleled around this to try and detach ourselves from the character, because at many moments when you're watching the film, you're seeing Jake Gyllenhaal make that transcendent, meditative, serene performance, and you can, if you make the mistake, get lost into his character and to almost feel inspired to want to participate.
Most of the analysis, this isn't a film that normalizes or romanticizes crime, because the crime as a spectacle or crime as something normalized, this is already post that. This is like, it's been that way. And if we didn't have like a media circus or certain components of capitalism that reward specific kinds of psychopathic behavior, then we wouldn't have people like Lou Bloom who can manipulate the system or truly use the system to its like highest potency. Really is what he does, in my opinion. In a capitalist society, Lou Bloom may be a villain, but you can't blame a tiger for being hungry when he's living under this kind of system, when he's trying to make a name for himself in an American capitalist world.
Especially when there's meat markets around the corner everywhere you go.
Exactly. And but most analysis of this film, or most reviews, do hyper-focus on the idea that Lou Bloom as a man is some sort of sociopath or psychopath, something interchangeable like that. And I think it loses the... I don't know how, because like the film is really heavy-handed sometimes, with this being like a story of symbols and metaphors for small businesses within American economic systems. Like it is very straightforward about that. So we definitely shouldn't focus on any character, including like Nina, Rick, or Joe's, as being like specific human beings. Like Bill Paxton's character is that other rival company that attempts to consolidate this smaller, like up-and-comer. Rick is obviously the abused worker. Like he's kind of like that Marxist framework in all of its exploited kind of, dismal sadness and depression, considering what happens to him. But he is that kind of Marxist framework writ large, I should say. And Riz Ahmed did amazing as Rick too. I want to say that was really good. And Nina, what do you think Nina represented, like symbolically, in this story?
Nina represented someone who is just trying to make ends meet, to try and find their own happiness, and their happiness in a job or something like that, where they're doing something. But then you see her direction slowly shift away from something wholesome, something beautiful, and then towards the Lou Bloom capitalist, dehumanizing quality that is very much overbearing and saturated.
I think Nina, Rene Russo's character, and once again, everybody did amazing, okay? Bill Paxton, Riz Ahmed, and Rene Russo were all incredible. I think Nina represents more so, like, either media or in a larger, like, more kind of generalized way, like industry itself. I think that she does represent, like, a struggling media, a struggling industry, trying to keep people devoted to the product that she's trying to push, and it's more difficult in our increasingly more like digital and competitive age.
Absolutely.
And she gets someone like Lou Bloom, who kind of comes and, for lack of a better word right now, revolutionizes certain things within her business, or sees it as the ultimate product that it can be. I think that she is definitely like industry. I think she's media, and she's how Lou Bloom kind of like manipulates the situation. She's responsible, or she's in several of my favorite scenes. I believe she's married to Dan Gilroy as well. So there's a lot of good chemistry there. But I love the scene. I think it happens almost directly at the middle, where Lou and Nina are having dinner at that Mexican restaurant, and he says one of my favorite lines. He's like coercing her into sexual favors in order to give her footage of these crime scenes, and he says, and she's like, "You can't pressure me into sleeping with you. That's not what friends do." And he gets that great smile that he mastered on this, that creepy kind of vacant or empty or misanthropic,
definitely misanthropic smile.
But he says, "No, you're wrong. Friends are a gift you give yourself." And that's always been one of my favorite moments of 2010s cinema. Like I said, this isn't like a masterpiece, but there are so many just incredible moments that I think define the generation that we're currently in.
And there's a lot to say, because it starts off as a critique of the gig economy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you have Lou Bloom being this thief, petty thief, who goes around trying to sell scrap metal at a scrap yard, and he's rightly put to be the thief that he is by the guy who's running that company. And that transitions into him looking for other areas where a gig economy does this to us. It dehumanizes us and makes us want to, kind of like at all costs, even the cost to our ethical decisions, do something questionable. And it's something of capitalist society to make us shirk our responsibilities.
No, absolutely. And it's not like the skills he had essentially as a scavenger were improper. They weren't being utilized in the right field. Because, he employed most of that skill set into his crime reporting, if we can call it that, really. Which eventually led to him manipulating crimes and murders to happen.
That's very true. It's really sad that it happened that way, but I think that's part of the critique, is to show that this is an inevitable outcome of such a system. Is that, and it's true even to, as you were saying earlier, something like The Social Network or Steve Jobs, where you have this sort of business entrepreneur magnate who pushes the boundaries, the ethical boundaries, in order to make that next up-and-coming big business. And that is at the expense of just about everyone else around them.
This movie is a lot more ruthless, even, than Sorkin's materials there. Because, like Jesse Eisenberg, or I'm sorry, Mark Zuckerberg and like Steve Jobs are like kind of positioned to be misanthropes, but like Sorkin gives enough to let you see that they are deeply hurt by the people that they've abused to get to the position that they're at, and like they're lonely people. You don't get that with Lou Bloom. Lou Bloom he says straight up, like, maybe it's not that I don't understand people, but it's that I hate them.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't change. In fact, like you just said, his behavior is rewarded over and over again, a misanthropic behavior. So I think it goes even further than those two films in the sense that capitalism doesn't just reward psychopathic behavior, it rewards hateful, misanthropic, spiteful behavior. And it also gives you, because I think that Sorkin is a romantic at his heart, because Nightcrawler is saying that it also gives you no reason to want to change that. Like, you should absolutely not change that. That's part of the fairy tale of Steve Jobs that we were talking about, how he, how the ending might have been disagreeable. The Nightcrawler, why would Lou Bloom ever change? Why would he ever? Why would he ever start to change his ways? Why, when he's being rewarded at every turn?
Yeah, and I think what elevates something like Steve Jobs or the Social Network to a masterpiece is the incorporation of the philosophy of lack, where we are like a porcupine with spikes, or a hedgehog, probably like the hedgehog's dilemma, where we have spikes on our back and we want to be hugged, but we stab other people when they hug us. And so we have that hurt dynamic going on, like Steve Jobs or like Mark Zuckerberg, where you have that business entrepreneur magnate who's trying to make their stamp into the society they occupy, and that's because they're lacking something, or at least that's what society is telling us, right? Especially a capitalist society is telling us that we lack something when we don't. That's the lie, right? But the reality is that we're whole, we're already complete, and you just have to get rid of the delusions in order to find that completeness.
I feel like in Nightcrawler, Rick even addresses that.
He does, but
doesn't he say, like, it's all about, like, being comfortable with what you don't have, man. It's all about being okay.
It is, but it's in a way where, there's also this whole authentic and inauthentic discussion happening throughout the film's language. And the filmic language is saying that, if we are to accept a capitalist society, we're going to have to also at the same time accept the people like Lou Bloom,
yes,
who are going to be there forever. They're going to be present as people who who go into positions of leadership.
And I think Steve Jobs is fantastic. I'm on the same page with you. Social Network is a masterpiece through and through. That's a fantastic film. Nothing negative to say about it. Nightcrawler, my criticisms of it do come from a place where I feel it is heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel it is ham-fisted near the end in the interrogation with the actor from The Wire. She was very good in it, but it was just a very ham-fisted scene that seemed to try to convince the audience that, like, of its true attitudes, which I think was a mistake. I think the attitude is very palpable and you can get it, but, like, I think Gilroy was trying to just set the audience straight on, like, on the tone of the film.
Okay.
And it was a bit way too heavy-handed. Sorkin has a lot of nuance with his work. The only reason I keep comparing these films is because this was I wouldn't call it a trend, but if something unites a lot of American films in the 2010s, it is this critique of capitalism, and it's this specific one. Nightcrawler is more ruthless, but maybe by proxy of that as well. It's also more hopeless. It's more nihilistic for sure, and it's more hammy. It's more it's more contrived.
Yeah, and I would like to jump off of that, especially the nihilistic undertones, because in one particular scene, Lou Bloom, when he's heavily criticized by Nina for missing an important news story, and he's creating his list, and like this thing's expanding, and it's like this whole vision, I guess, of a business plan kind of coming together, and then he makes a fatal mistake, or the situation and the circumstances don't play out in his favor. What does he do? He goes up in front of his own mirror in his bathroom and he breaks it in a rage. And that is something where it does go against what I was saying earlier, where it's lacking the hedgehog's dilemma that the Social Network addresses properly. That also shows that Lou Bloom is also hurting and lacking. But that's the one of the only scenes where that is shown. And almost every other scene throughout the film shows Lou Bloom as someone being this cool, level-headed, in control of the situation, making sure that the spectacle plays in his favor, and then that he is the one who profits, and his video production news company also profits, and that he's able to get to that end where he's trying to make that vision a reality. And it's that where I see that the inspirational undertones are also disgusting, right? Because you do see that one moment where he's going through and he's there before the scene of the crime, and that other scene where he's moving the dead body from the two vehicles over into the camera lighting, so that way he can get the proper framing for his video footage for the WCLA or whatever. Mm-hmm. That particular scene there was really, like, just for me personally, it was very revolting to see someone invade.
But the score was so good. And
it was.
You were talking about the ironic, inspirational qualities
exactly.
of it. Because in any normal or conventional film, that would be an inspirational moment. He's about to make progress in his business, in his trade, and he's learning, and he's kind of reinventing what he's doing as well. I mean, that's the ultimate American goal, is to love what you do and reinvent it along the way and get paid handsomely for it. I even like that the first thing you see in the film is it's a Michael Mann-esque wide shot, right? But it's an empty billboard, really, and that's almost kind of like symbolically kind of saying that for venture capitalists, for hungry entrepreneurs, for small businesses, your name could be here on this billboard. That there is space within the American pie for your share.
Right.
You just have to go and get it.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it is well said. What I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to say, where was it, the difference here between how this was being a criticism that was well said versus The Social Network, where it was elevated to a masterfully said?
I mean, it was masterfully said in The Social Network as well, because Social Network is ultimately a film about, like, betrayal, and it's not a betrayal of symbols. I don't think there's too much symbolic in The Social Network. I think that when he betrays, like, Andrew Garfield and stuff, and, like, falls basically in love with Justin Timberlake's, like, charisma, he's doing that as an insecure college kid who all of a sudden has a great idea but absolutely has no kind of social intelligence whatsoever. What elevates a film like The Social Network, I mean, apart from a better screenplay, apart from all-around better performances too. Jesse Eisenberg, I think, did a much better job than Jake Gyllenhaal did in this film. There's a lot of nuance and subtlety in that film. David Fincher is also a much more interesting director. It just might be unfair to say of Gilroy, since he's made like 2 films up to this point, but David Fincher was a seasoned... a lot of people could argue for master at that point.
Okay, I can see that, the experience coming into play.
Also, the score by Trent Reznor, everything was, like, perfect in The Social Network, the perfect storm, the perfect statement to make in 2010. Nightcrawler, there are a lot of amateur mistakes in it, like certain ham-fisted elements. The Social Network is pretty nuanced, it is pretty subtle a lot of the times, due not only to Jesse Eisenberg's almost lack of expression, but to Sorkin, who has for like the last 30 years been known as one of the best screenwriters in Hollywood, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But what elevates it, I agree with you when it talks about the lack, but I almost feel like Nightcrawler as well is dealing with, like, if we are talking about a human and not just a symbol, like someone who has already been dehumanized to the point of can't even comprehend that, or like a certain theories like lack aren't profitable. So, well, I mean, why would he ever concern himself with that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you did say it along the same lines was where I was trying to get at, where the difference delineates from well said to masterpiece. A big part of that being the experience between the two directors that were contrasting.
Definitely, experience is a big part, but also, Lou Bloom is a loner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Mark Zuckerberg actually had like best friends and brothers to completely betray and stab in the back and just gut in public. Like he had those kinds of people. Lou Bloom didn't like Rick. He never got like a brotherly sense of affection from Rick. He was always underhanding him. You know, Nina is not his lover. Like he didn't have the same kind of human relationships that Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg had. So he really had no one to confront him and for him to even have even a note of shame because he didn't have any kind of human connection like that. And that's really also where the social network kind of, I mean, that's the point of the social network, is that he's the loneliest billionaire in the world by the end of the film because he has no friends because they all tried to sue him because he's a fucking idiot. Like, Steve Jobs has a bit of a decidedly optimistic ending to it, but it was aiming for that as well.
Yeah, which it did have.
Like, he had to answer to the same 4 people at 3 different periods of his life for the bad things that he's done. Lou will never be asked to answer for anything. That's why that interrogation scene had no, like, weight to it, other than, like, just reframing and repeating things that we saw, because it's not like I expect Lou Bloom to care. He's not supposed to care. Like, am I supposed to be shocked by that he has, like, no feelings of remorse for Rick? Well, I saw it when he was telling Rick while he was dying, like, you messed up, Rick. Like, yeah. You know, like, wow. It's just, like, that's also something that kind of keeps it away from a complete masterpiece, or any sort of masterpiece. It's a great film, but Lou Bloom was written to be a loner, and you're not going to get that kind of emotional attachment from it. You're not even going to feel for Nina when she is, like, willingly fetishizing her own sexuality and she's willingly giving it up. You know, you're not going to feel completely bad for Joe, even, because Joe would have filmed him. Like probably, I don't know. Like, you don't have that connection with the rest of these characters. I like Rick a lot, and I think that has to do more with Riz Ahmed's performance, which was really, really good.
Yeah, he's like the only person you can really connect with.
Yes, and then deliberately Gilroy kills him.
Yeah.
He manipulates Lou Bloom manipulates the situation so that he could have Rick killed and then tell him to his face why he's being killed, and even make him submit, like the punished or exploited worker that he is. Like, make him submit even in death to Lou's authority. Like, that was probably the most cruel part of it, was, like, making him admit to it. Like, I forgot exactly the lines, but, like, you know, you would have taken away my negotiating ability if I let you live or something. And he's like, I don't know if I would. I don't know that.
That's crazy. You know, in a way, though, it does give the overall film Nightcrawler a charm, because it is an amateur up and starting company that transitions into a big business in much the same way that Dan Gilroy is making a debut film about the same exact topic, and that, and that he is a person who is trying to make his own stamp in the world through the lens of filmmaking.
And Gilroy is like a noted screenwriter. He at least has a history within
yeah, I'm not saying he's totally inexperienced.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. But no, I agree with you. Metacontextually, it works as well. I'm sure you could do this as an entire reading of Hollywood and, like, what the independent filmmaker has to do to become, like, accepted by the wider industry. I'm sure. I'm positive you can do that. Mm-hmm. Nightcrawler, though, to me is a fantastic film. I have a real soft spot for it, and I think, like, more than anything, whether it's masterful or not, it's kind of inconsequential to the point that when it works, it's on fire. Like, there is a certain adrenaline from a lot of these scenes, and it is wonderfully put together. The influences that it borrows from, I think, are the right ones for this particular story, and I think it's a remarkable film.
Yeah, it's remarkable in its own way. What I really liked and I thought was really well done was how the spectacle itself is handled. Mm-hmm. Because that is most significantly
there's a lot of complexities to these scenes.
Yeah, a mark of a capitalist society is the spectacle.
Because to Lou Bloom as well, things only feel real, or, like, things seem a lot more real when it's on TV. Mm-hmm. Like, if he says those lines. And that's why a lot of the times we don't exactly see what he's filming until we see it being shown to Nina. like as an optional product. We only see these ravaged dead people when they're being appraised or auctioned off in a way, and it's normally dead white people. I do like that they brought like the very real idea of race into it. Like, no, we're not interested in people from minority neighborhoods. We're interested in rich white people being killed by minorities. Like, and it's very clear about that. I believe she tells him that like almost immediately.
Yeah, that is one of the immediate, I guess, criteria for her. That was wild.
Because, I mean, because we're feeding into this this
that's kind of interesting because that's a meta-contextual discussion saying this is where the dehumanization starts.
Yeah. And it's about the iconography of exploitation as well.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what makes this film, I think, again, what you said, remarkable. Not masterful, but really, stands out.
Oh yeah, it would make like a list of the best films of the decade for me. I'm not sure where it would be on that list or how many films would compose or comprise it, but it's certainly one that makes me think directly of the 2010s and of kind of a gross ethos that was going around, and I'm glad certain films did criticize it. I mean, if you look at the 2010s, that's kind of where like hedonism or even nihilism, egotism, that's where capitalism kind of got so huge that it was absurd in the end. Because in the end, we ended with a Trump presidency. Like, it got to the point of absurdity really quick.
Yeah.
And that was before, I mean, this was before a Trump presidency. This kind of like, and so was The Social Network, things like that. Like, these are films that are foreshadowing events that they don't necessarily know what's going to happen.
Yeah, events of absurdity as a result of the capitalist society.
They're reflecting the behavior that they're seeing. Nightcrawler's a lot more ruthless about it.
Yeah, definitely. A good word, ruthless.
If it bleeds, it leads. But, you have any closing thoughts?
No. I mean, I guess I have one, and it was like this. Remember. I don't know. If it's just... if it's well said, it's well said, and it does make an impression on me to know that even a small business venture can be disgusting and revolting in its own way.
Oh, absolutely, especially like within this kind of like economic system, like within this kind of reward system, it has to be in order to be a successful business and grow the way that you're told that you want to grow. It has to be. It has to be. All power is abuse, or maybe all success is abuse. If you're having to follow very specific rules of exploitation to get there.
Makes me want to leave America.
You guys know what you guys should do watching this? You should hit the like button, and don't think I'm just begging for it. I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So just go on and I had to get that line in there at some way. Thank you guys for watching it.